A J Mix exclusive.
I did a little internet research on Tupac 187 and a certain video kept popping up. Do you know, it's called Tupac 187 Refuted. Do you know what this is?
Yeah, it's actually got a couple of different names. It's a video that was made by some guys who were trying to get the drop on some information that had been leaked. And they put it out there and they tried their hardest to refute it. And I think it kind of fell like a lead balloon. It went away for a while. And it surfaces periodically, but it's some opinion and some conjecture about some of the information in the video. It's really not. It's kind of a non-event, unless you consider 1,000 viewers out of 200 million people in the United States. 1,000 viewers to be a mob. It hasn't been really popular, but yeah, I'm familiar with it.
I guess it's pretty obvious to say that you disagree with the talking points in it. I wanted to ask you some of the questions that it's saying about your book. Are you open to that?
I am. I haven't seen a video yet. Actually, maybe I get you to turn your mute your speaker a little bit. All right, can you hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. I think now, unless it's a different video than the one I've seen, the video was actually made before there was ever a book that came out. So if there were talking points about the book, we can talk about the talking points of the book. I just don't know that the video actually, nobody who made that video actually read the book, because the video was done months before the book came out. But fire away. Let's see what we can tear up.
Okay, in this so-called in this video, it talks about a so-called confession letter.
Right.
It quotes a lot of sources in here, and it says that there was an alleged 1999 police report that dismissed this letter completely.
Well, I've not seen one. I know that there's been a couple of people, Shady K and a couple other people that have chosen to speak out about the book. When the letter came out was actually withheld by Chris Blatchford at Fox News, and it was not given to the Las Vegas Police Department. A copy of the letter was not given to the Las Vegas Police Department. According to Mr. Blatchford, the only thing that he actually ever did was he called the Las Vegas Police Department and asked them a question about Little Half Dead. Vegas police didn't even know who Little Half Dead was, and that was the extent of their interest in the case. So Chris, actually taking the other information about the other shooters, or the alleged shooters, he took that information and he kept it because he did not specifically trust that the Vegas police were going to do anything to try to follow up on it. And of course, if you have information that you feel is relevant, you want to follow up on it. You don't want to just bury it away somewhere. So I can't see how anybody in the world could say that the letter was with the Las Vegas Police Department when the guy who actually has the original copy of the letter says that he never gave it to the Vegas police. So I don't know what kind of investigation you could really do.
Speaking of Chris Blatchford, they quote him as saying that the letter was toxic.
The letter is toxic, but not in the way that they're talking about. When they say that the letter is toxic, what Chris Blatchford is talking about is that the letter can get people killed. The LAPD, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but when the LAPD leaked that letter hit the air and that video came out, and within 6 days, Suge Knight got shot. So I'm not saying that the two events are definitely correlated or definitely related, but you do the math. Something comes out, Suge Knight's name is involved with it, and suddenly Suge Knight gets shot by two people who allegedly say, you killed Tupac, and they shot him. Chris is right about it, that if the letter goes where we think the letter is going to go, and it implicates the people that we think it implicates, at least what the letter infers, yeah, it is toxic. Toxic meaning it could get somebody killed. It's not toxic as in it's waste. I'm not sure how those two terms even get mixed up with each other. But toxic definitely means deadly. And if Chris Blatchford said that, I agree.
The biggest argument that's going to come from people is if this letter contained this information, why did not Chris Blatchford run the letter?
Well, there's I can't speak for Chris. Chris has his own reasons for it. I can tell you a couple of things that I was told about it. The first thing is that, of course, Chris has very limited resources. He's an investigative reporter with Fox, but that doesn't mean that he has an unlimited budget, and that also doesn't mean that Fox is necessarily in the business of investigative journalism like it used to be. So Chris took the letter and put it away, and he was fully intending to turn around and investigate it at a later point. And like a lot of things that we do, uh, days become weeks, which become months, and it just doesn't get done. And by that time, Fox has really changed its directive. And again, Chris has an option. He's got a very limited time on the news to do a segment. He can either spend his time doing something on a current bit of news that people are interested in, or he can go back to shuffle through an old letter and see if it was actually true. I do know that element was one of the reasons why he didn't. It was a function of just not going back and doing it. He held the letter because he believed the letter to be truthful. He believed the letter to be true. Obviously, it doesn't mean that just because you think a letter is true, that you're just going to go run out and knock down the doors because it's the next best thing since sliced bread. Again, like I said, I can't speak for Chris, but I can tell you that he definitely believed that the letter is legitimate. He definitely believed that the statements that were made in it were made by a person that he had done previous work with as an informant witness, who had provided credible testimony. So I can't speak for Chris and know all the reasons that were in Chris's head, but I can tell you a lot of it was a function of time. A lot of it was his bandwidth and his resources that he had at his disposal. And then I think the last thing that was a good reason why Chris didn't follow up on it higher is because, again, when you have something that is evidence, like a confession letter or an alleged confession letter, you may not want to taint that evidence. You may want to wait for an appropriate time to give it to somebody that you might trust can get it in the hands of law enforcement that might take it seriously. And that's exactly what he did. He gave it to Russ Poole and I, and we took it to the police.
I think I got a little ahead of myself in the previous questions, and I'll edit this. But what is this confession letter? How did you receive it, and how did it end up on the internet?
Well, let me clear up a couple of misconceptions about it first. One of the misconceptions you'll hear out there, and unfortunately it's kind of come from our own camp because of some confusion on who knew what and where and when and how. I've known Chris Blatchford since 2007, 2008 period. We did a piece with Kevin Hackey and Frank Alexander and Suge Knight about Tupac assassination, Conspiracy to Revenge, which was my movie. And I met Chris at that point in time. Chris and I have kept in contact over the years, and every time there's been something interesting about Tupac or about the Tupac case, or the Wallace case, we've certainly talked about it, gotten on the phone, sent an email back and forth. It's not like we go to lunch every day, but we've known each other for a number of years. Unfortunately, somebody in our camp had put it out there that Russ Poole was the first time that I had ever met Chris Blatchford, and unfortunately, that's not true. I'd known Chris for a long time. When I got together with Russ Poole to do the book, I had completed, I would say probably 80-90% of the book was done. And I thought it would be a good idea to see if Russ Poole wanted to add some anecdotes or some information in the book to actually, color it up. It's always interesting to hear the stories of the people that are working the beat, the guys that are really down there digging it up. And so I thought it would be fun to have Russ contribute to the book and maybe add some value to it. And He certainly did, not in the way that ultimately I had originally thought of it, but in a much more significant way when he was able to come across some more documents and some more witnesses in the case. So we got together with Chris, and Russ reached out to Chris because we were actually vetting some other information, and Chris had been pretty significant in getting Russell some of the original documents that Russell didn't have from police and media and the Times, and Chris had been helpful with Russ in getting that information. So Russ contacted Chris, and we were vetting some information at Fox News. And it was at that time that Chris dropped this letter on us. We were not there to talk about the letter. He didn't call us and say, hey, I got this letter I want you to see. I've never followed up on it, but maybe you guys could. It wasn't like that. It was much more organic. He was looking through his files of all the information that he collected over the years. And when he came across the letter, he said, this letter is interested to me. And it's interesting to me, not interested, but interesting to me. And that he believed that the information that was in the letter might actually be credible. And since Russ and I were writing a book and we were investigating it and we were talking with the Los Angeles police, Russ still has contacts with the police department. Chris thought it would be worth that somebody might have the time and the bandwidth to investigate the letter. So that's how we got
it. When you read this letter, how much investigation did you do on the background of the individuals in the letter before you decided to make this information public?
Well, let me see if I understand your question. When you're asking me about the letter, when we got the letter, how much research did we do on the players involved? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I was asking because the letter has been made public. It was teased in an advertisement for your book. Mm-hmm. I was asking how much investigating you did in the individuals named in the letter before teasing it in the trailer for your book.
Oh, okay. A Soria family name is actually a very popular name. It's actually very significant in the Oxnard and Ventura areas. That would be just north of Los Angeles County, Ventura County. Soria family was involved with Cesar Chavez and the migration revolts back in the day that set up union farm workers and was very significant in that. There actually are schools in the Ventura County School District that are named after Soria. So Soria by name isn't just a name that is just a flyaway name. Soria's family are actually pretty good people. Dad manages some apartments, good guy, pretty normal family actually. Robert was neighbors with the Patton brothers at the apartment complexes in Reseda where they lived. And it was through his friendship and relationship with the Pattons that Soria actually got introduced to the blood gangs, got introduced to the death row group, if you want to call it that, that he got involved with that, and to a large degree he ran around with those fellas. He was kind of a periphery member of he wasn't a gang member. Soria was never part of that. It really wasn't something that he wanted to be involved with. And the reason I can tell you this is because I've had multiple phone calls with him. We've exchanged easily a dozen letters back and forth where I've asked Soria these questions. He is in prison, and to something completely unrelated to anything in the letter. And he seemed to be a pretty straightforward dude. Now that said, he was as caught up in all the nonsense as the rest of the gangs were. And the only difference being is that Soria had a relationship with Chris Blatchford. So we started the information about Soria kind of by proxy through Chris Blatchford, because Chris Blatchford had worked with Soria. Soria had been a confidential informant on the California Highway Patrol office burglaries. He provided good information to the Highway Patrol and to the state investigators about everything that had happened and the persons of interest. And it all turned out to be true. Several arrests were made, and it was a fairly big deal at the time. He worked with Chris Blatchford, and Chris Blatchford liaisoned with law enforcement. Robert didn't go directly to law enforcement. He went through Chris Blatchford. So, in looking at Robert as a person, as much as you can know anybody from things they did 20 years ago, it was pretty straightforward. The guy, before all of this happened, really didn't have much of a record. He had, some domestic problems with an ex-wife. And that was the extent of, kind of how deep that well went. He was a guy who ran around with gangbangers and kind of rose to that level. So there wasn't a whole lot more about him that we could really look into.
He has been labeled a schizophrenic child molester.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that he's been called that. Where that came from, actually, in the little piece of paper that they have, was that it was an allegation that was made by his ex-wife in a custody battle over their daughter. And sadly, as many of us who have been through divorces, especially messy ones, know, allegations can get very nasty, true or not true. And in this case, it certainly wasn't true. Robert Soria has never been clinically diagnosed anything, and especially clinically diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic is the term that was kind of exploited and expanded. Soria, is he a schizophrenic? I don't get that vibe. I mean, everything he's told me so far has been on the level and it's been legit. So I'm not really sure what he would be schizophrenic about. And the second thing is, I've never seen any diagnosis that anybody else has put up legally, medically, to say that this guy is. So, accusations fly during heated divorces and heated custody battles, and that's the context that it was in. And I've not seen a single shred of evidence from Shady K or Anthony Battaglia or anybody else that's put that out there and proven that.
You say that you've been in touch with him and received letters. Has he confirmed the contents of the letter to you?
Absolutely, both in writing and on a phone call. I actually have several recorded phone calls with him, and he definitely talks about the events of the letter. He talks about the letter, and he was willing to put it down in writing. He will absolutely will not recant what he put in the letter. And when you think about that for a minute, Jesse, that's really important, because if he's in prison and he is a snitch, or he is ratting out people that have gang affiliations, and he's accusing people of murder in this letter, and he's in prison, the guy really has no reason to stick to his story. In fact, he's probably got a better reason to recant, because guys on the outside usually know guys on the inside. And if you get the reputation for being a snitch, or you get the reputation for ratting people out while you're in prison, you have a very short shelf life. So the fact that he is unwilling to recant, his exact words were that he knows that Danny and Malcolm Patton don't want to be where he's at right now, but he will not recant. And yeah, I've got that in writing.
So between you and Russell Poole meeting with Blatchford and getting this letter, once you get this letter, what was your reaction, and what was your first instinct to do with this information?
My reaction to the thing was a shock, and it wasn't because of Half Dead or Patton's or anybody else or any information Chris gave me. What shocked me was that somebody who had absolutely no idea about the inner workings of death row or the shooting itself would write a letter. This guy was completely on the outside, yet he named Reggie Wright Jr. in the letter itself as providing information about where they were going to be in Vegas the night that Tupac was going to get shot, or actually Suge Knight was going to get shot. And so that right there immediately caught my interest, because for a long time the assassination movies have dumped the responsibility for Shakur's and Knight's shooting in Reggie Wright's lap. So with that being in the letter, that was a time capsule from 1998, who is this person that would mention Reggie Wright's name? And of course, what motive would he have for mentioning Reggie Wright at all and tying him into any kind of attempt on Suge or Tupac's life? So yeah, I was stunned.
Did Frank Alexander know about this letter?
Yeah, Frank Alexander did. A lot of people don't know that. They don't understand that. They think that this was some publicity stunt that I came up with because Frank died and I didn't have anybody else to make a movie with, and I needed somebody else because Lord knows I wasn't talented or knew enough to make my own movie. So I obviously had to have somebody like Russell Poole jump in and help me. And I say that with a smile. The reality of the situation is that Frank did know about the letter. Frank knew about the allegations of a car being in Baker. Frank knew about a lot of those things. And I got the letter, I want to say maybe 5 months before Frank actually passed away, right around November, I think, of 2012. And we sat on the letter, and Frank and I had many, many discussions about the letter and about it. And Frank's attitude was, well, what can we do to, follow it up? What can we do to investigate it? And that was kind of where we left it for a long time. And in fact, we kind of took a break because honestly, I was kind of burned out. We kind of took a break off of the assassination investigations for me to do a couple of other projects. They were all Tupac related projects, but they were not Tupac killing projects. They were about the life of Tupac, and I did those projects back and back. So there was probably 5 or 6 months gap between the time I was doing editing on those other 2 projects and any talk at all of the assassination movies. I kind of just didn't really want to mess with it at that point. And the letter wasn't going anywhere, and the information wasn't going anywhere. So, we thought about doing that, but that was when we started looking at doing Assassination 3. I had wrapped up doing the other 2 movies. And unfortunately for me and for a lot of people, Frank passed away in April of 2013 and never really got an opportunity to work with me on following these leads up. But he did know they existed.
At what point did you decide to take this letter to law enforcement?
Well, what are you going to do with a letter like this? I'm not Columbo. I don't run around trying to wear the trench coat and trying to be a super secret spy. I don't have a private investigator's license, nor do I want one. My father does. I could work under his private investigator's license if I wanted to. But I don't feel compelled to because that's not what I do for a living. That said, what does any responsible person do with information that they get regarding an attempted murder? You go to the police. That's what you do. You don't take it on yourself. You don't go investigate it yourself. You don't contaminate leads or contaminate evidence by taking information that you could give to the police and saying, oh, I'm going to go blunder my way through an investigation. Maybe I'll get lucky, or maybe I'll give away the whole damn case. Then the bad guys circle the wagons and protect themselves. And then when you give it to the police, your evidence is pretty much spoiled because there's no element of surprise. There's no element of I won't say ambush, but a lot of police work is based on being 2 steps ahead of the criminals. So the idea to take it to the police was always something that we wanted to do. The question was, under what context were we going to work with the police? Were we going to give it to them as, hey, this book is written, this book is completed, the letter's in it, we're giving it to you now, and we're done, and we're going to put it out anyway, so, you do what you want. That was at one point something we had thought about, but really at the probably halfway point of getting through the finished last version of the book, if you will, once Michael Carlin came on board, Russell and I felt very strongly that no, We don't want to put this information out ahead, in the book ahead of the police. We don't want them to feel sandbagged. We don't want them to feel betrayed. We certainly don't want the question asked, if this was that important, why didn't you go to the police? Because that's the catch-22. People say to us, "Oh, if it was that important, how come you didn't follow up on it?" Well, we did. We took it to the police. I don't have the resources to follow up on it like that. So we took it to the police, and some very interesting things happened as a result. But I think, to answer your question directly, I think it was probably about halfway through the last iteration of the book where we got to it. We had the information in the letter. There wasn't a total agreement in our camp between the three of us of when to give it to the Los Angeles Police Department, but it was certainly something that Russ and I felt very, very strongly about. Give it to the people that could do something about it.
So this book is not based on the letter. This book was in works way before you receiving this letter.
Oh yeah, this book was the book was really Tupac assassination, the book, if you will. The book was originally going to be basically Tupac assassination, the book. It was a transcription of both movies, Tupac assassination 1 and 2, and then we were going to present documents and actually color it up and dig deeper within the context of the assassination movies themselves. What we found was that that's what it was, and I thought, do you really want to keep going down the same road? Are people going to feel ripped off if they buy a book and all they're getting is the wordy version of the movie? So we worked on it, and like I said, then I jumped off of that and I took the 2 editing projects that I took that soaked me for a number of months. But yeah, the book was, as far as the central themes of the book was written with the police documents and a lot of things. It was written way before this confession letter ever saw the light of day. Again, the theory has never changed. The confession letter helps color it up. It helps add to it. It helps enhance the theory and maybe fill in a couple of holes that hadn't been filled in before. But ultimately, the theory of liability has been the same since 2006. All we've done is just added more and more layers of texture to it.
We were speaking earlier, and you said that you took this to police. Can you tell us about meeting with the police? Did you just take it into the police station?
Yeah, that's what we did. We walked in and said, "I want to speak to the commissioner. I want to speak to Commissioner Gordon about this." It was a very, very long thought process to take it to the police in the first place. We get gigged. Shady K and a couple of other people have said, "Well, why didn't you take it to the Las Vegas police? Why, if that's a Tupac murder, how dumb are you for taking it to the Los Angeles police?" And I say to you, you're idiots. And the reason that you're idiots is because if the commission of a crime actually happens in California, in Los Angeles, but gets executed in Las Vegas, and they cross state lines to execute it, the jurisdiction is here in Los Angeles. That's where the investigation starts. So if you had that information and you have the whole picture, then you would go to the Los Angeles Police Department. You wouldn't go to the Las Vegas Police Department. And that, my friends, is why the people that were criticizing the book early on and even asking that question, it was proof that they had absolutely no freaking clue what the book was about, because they asked the question, "Why didn't you go there?" Well, if you knew what our theory was, and you've read the book now, many people have read the book, by the time you get done reading the book, you understand why we went to the Los Angeles police and we didn't go to the Las Vegas Police Department. In fact, it may have even been a federal case, but that would have been up for the LAPD to make that decision. So we decided to go to the Los Angeles Police Department, and Russ Poole made a connection with the deputy chief of police for the city of Los Angeles. His name is Kirk Albanese, and he told Kirk what we were doing. He told Kirk that we had what we believed to be a confession letter. He told the deputy chief of police that we wanted to come in and we wanted to discuss the theories and the ideas that we had in the book, and that we wanted to cooperate with law enforcement to see if there was any traction that we could make on the leads that were mentioned in the book or in the confession letter. And that was what we did. We were cordially invited by Chief Albanese's secretary to come to the new Parker Center in downtown Los Angeles. We even had preferred parking down in the police department's basement. We didn't have to use general public parking. We went in through the back door. We went all the way up. And that's where we met with the Deputy Chief of Police, Kirk Albanese. We met with Dennis McCarthy, who is the another, I think he's a lieutenant there. We met with Captain William Hayes, who is a captain in charge of the entire robbery homicide division for the Los Angeles Police Department, and one other detective by the name of Darren Dupree. He's a Detective 1, which is the lowest ranking detective in the detective squad.
Did you present them the sides of the letter at this meeting?
Well, let me tell you about the meeting. How's that?
Okay.
All right. So, the meeting. Well, we went to Parker Center. We came upstairs. The meeting lasted about an hour. To make sure that you get through as much information as we could possibly get through, and to make sure that we get the ideas across, I had written a PowerPoint presentation and some case notes, basically kind of an outline, like you would if you were doing a sales presentation to a board of directors for a company, or you were doing a presentation to senior management on a project that you were working on. This was a very high-level outline. It bullet pointed that, but it gave enough pieces of information and proof that we actually had the information to tell the police that not only were we serious about this, but that these leads were legit. We weren't just saying, in the Tim Brennan way of saying it, well, so a confidential informant told us one day, and we can't tell you his name, and there's no other proof of it, but you should believe us anyway. We didn't do that, and that was why in the PowerPoint presentation itself, we included pictures, we included sections from the story, we included timelines, we included interchangeable liabilities. But the other thing that we included in there was an actual picture, a scan of the confession letter, the copy that I had received anyway of the confession letter. And of course, the fun thing about that is that the confession letter itself is not that yellow. The confession letter itself, remember, was a photocopy. I don't have the original. Russ Poole doesn't have the original. Michael Carlin does not have the original. The original is still with Chris Blatchford because it preserves the chain of custody. And when you have a photocopy, I don't know too many of you that have photocopies that are yellow, but that's the whole point. When I went to do the PowerPoint presentation, the letter came off looking like a photocopy, and it wasn't very exciting. So we went ahead and just colored the letter yellow because it looked like it was written on a yellow pad. And in doing that, we, put it in the PowerPoint. But it was meant to be a picture of the letter. It wasn't actually the full size of the letter itself, but it was buried within the contents of that PowerPoint. So they had a chance to look at it. Captain McCarthy was actually very interested, very intrigued about that. He liked it. Captain Hayes liked it. I took my picture with Kirk Albanese, with the deputy chief of police. You usually don't get those kind of meetings. And again, this wasn't like Russ and I just walked in the door down at the front desk of the LAPD and said, hey, we got a lead about Tupac. Somebody want to talk to us about that? Because we'd have gotten nowhere with that. So let's not go to the idea that we're just a couple of crackpots. We got the white glove treatment from the Los Angeles Police Department, who took both us and the confession letter and our leads very seriously. So I do not want to downplay the interest or the involvement of the LAPD with that meeting, but that's where we had it, and so that was that.
How long after that meeting did this letter hit the internet, and what was your reaction?
The letter itself hit the internet about 10 days after it hit the internet. And the truth of the matter is that Russell and I were leaving the meeting where this Darren Dupree detective, whom I'd actually met before and I knew of, I had told Russ that we were basically fucked at that point, because if Darren Dupree was the kind of person that I believed he was, that we would probably get that letter leaked. So as we left Parker Center that night, we were under the impression that we may not have objected enough. You know, it's kind of hard at an LAPD meeting to sit there and say, that man right there, that man, you get him out of this room. I'm not willing to talk to you. I want nothing to do with that man. That man is terrible. He's an awful person. You know, how far are you going to get? The LAPD could have just ended the meeting right there and said, you know, we don't want to talk to you. You know, you're insulting one of our detectives here. So it's kind of like, without a really good reason to tell the guy that he had to leave, that we stayed there and we manned up. We gave him the information just like we gave the other cops the information. But knowing the kind of guy he was, or trusting my gut instinct about that, I truly believed that he was going to give the information that we just presented to his ex-partner Shady K, and that we were going to get that information was actually going to get out and publicized somehow. And this came from the fact that this wasn't the first time. The last time that I had actually filed a report with the Los Angeles Police Department over the book Murder Rap, and the fact that its author was actually outing witnesses publicly without, you know, thinly veiled aliases and all that. But he was basically outing people that had absolutely no anticipation that the information that they were giving the police was going to end up in somebody's book. So I had complained to Internal Affairs about that. He got a copy of that, and he went ahead and pushed that all out on the internet. So meeting with Dupree, there was a probably 3 in 5 chance that the information was going to end up on the internet. So for a period of about a week, nothing happened. It didn't happen right away. And Russ and I thought, well, maybe this isn't going to go the way that we thought it was going to go. And it wasn't the letter that hit the internet first. It was information about the letter that actually hit the internet first. It started showing up on the chat boards, and that was kind of the smoking gun, because the people that were bringing up the information on the chat boards were the people that were Dupree's, you know, former partners on the police department. It was people that Dupree knew. And there was only 4 cops in that meeting. So one of them had to get the information to Shady K. And when Shady K started putting it out on the chat boards and started putting the information out there, at that point we had a problem with the information. And again, information is something that you can kind of quell a little bit. You can say, well, you can dispute the information. It's not accurate, and it certainly wasn't accurate when it first came out. So that was it. But then probably within 3 days after that information started coming out, that's when the letter itself actually broke. And when the letter broke, I was upset. I wasn't surprised, but I was upset and disappointed, because just like with the book Murder Rap that actually outed people who had no anticipation of having their information publicized, he went ahead and did the same thing for a second time with me and with that letter. And yeah, I guess you could say they did us a favor by putting those names out there publicly and saying, hey, well, you know, we have plausible deniability now because we didn't release those names publicly. Little Half Dead and Patton Brothers and all that. You know, we weren't even sure we were going to use their names. We were going to talk more about generically what the letter said. That was our decision to do in the book. And these guys went ahead and ran with it. They thought that they were going to get a scoop and maybe steal a little thunder, take a little press, get a few more video hits, and went ahead and pushed all those names out there publicly. It created a very dangerous situation that I will remember for a long time.
So just to be clear, one of the detectives at the meeting was the partner of author of Murder Rap, Greg Kading.
Yeah. I don't throw his name around a lot. I have my own acronym for him. But yeah, Dupree and Kading were partners. Dupree and Kading came to the Tupac assassination review, a press screening. It wasn't a review, it was a press screening.
What we would like to do, one of the problems that happened out in Las Vegas was that there was a lot of mistrust with local law enforcement in Los Angeles, particularly Compton PD.
Right.
You've got Reggie Wright employing Compton police officers working death row. Vegas was not sure who to trust, not sure whose team people were on. We've been able to bridge that gap here in LA, and I'm hoping that maybe through Frank or some type of networking setup, we can take leads, take clues that you might have, and share them with Las Vegas, but also use that information here in Los Angeles. Obviously, this is where death row is based. Secondly, one of the problems here is there's a lot of reference going on to the FBI or the feds, but you got to remember that this is not a federal investigation. This is basically isolated to Las Vegas. It's an isolated murder, and the feds don't have any authority within it. So the federal agencies are not going to just take over a murder investigation unless it's part of a much broader investigation. And Frank, I'm asking you here publicly, will you entertain an interview?
Publicly right now, for the record, yeah, I will talk with you. Kevin Hackey just walked up here, who was my replacement. He was the backup bodyguard to Tupac. He obviously has something he wanted to say.
I'll interject what you're saying. First of all, I'm a retired police officer. I was the undercover agent for the FBI for 4 years for Death Row Records in regards to racketeering investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigations did take over the investigation approximately about 20 minutes after Tupac was shot, which is a matter of public record. There's even on record, which is on the 9th, that the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police attempted to detain me. An agent by the name of Dan McMullen, who was my supervisor, contacted the Metropolitan Police Department at about 9 o'clock on September 9th. There was a whole slew of people in front of the hospital. Metropolitan Police car pulled out. I was the only guy, I arrived in Vegas that morning, that went to the police station, identified myself. I was given authorization to carry a firearm, which I still do have all the paperwork. Obviously, that came from higher up beyond Las Vegas Police. My supervisor was Dan McMullen, the FBI Wilshire office. Dan is, I believe, now in Seattle, which you can verify. John Ciccione, the ATF agent, was also my supervisor. My job, as I said, was to infiltrate death row for racketeering violations. There was another officer from Long Beach PD who worked undercover. Subsequently, Reggie Wright was my partner. I've known Reggie for many years. Based upon that, that's why I was called in to do this investigation. Okay, but what you basically just said, the FBI did take over the case, and obviously, as most of you do know, there is no statute of limitations on murder. Sooner or later, there will be an arrest.
And I was aware of all that. I didn't want to front you off. Okay. But nonetheless, you do have to understand, the FBI does not have jurisdiction over a singular murder. Okay, I'm explaining this to you so you know. Okay, they were looking at something much broader.
Let me correct you on one thing, okay? Tupac Shakur was a suspect in a racketeering investigation.
There's the key word.
So at that point in time, it became federal jurisdiction.
Okay,
Screening,
you clarified.
Review, it was press screening. They came to that. They stood us up in court when Greg Kading was subpoenaed to appear in court to testify on our behalf against Reggie Wright in a civil case. He was subpoenaed to appear, and he agreed to appear. And I will give you the name of our attorney. His name is Ken Hawley, Hawley. I'm not making this up. Mr. Hawley is the one who subpoenaed Mr. Kading to appear in court, and Mr. Kading did nothing but give us excuses and ultimately dodged a subpoena to come into court. And now it's how ironic that he and Reggie Wright are such good friends.
Do you feel the leak of the letter was personal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's been a really bad breakdown in communication, and I'm just going to put that out there publicly. There's been a really bad breakdown in communication between Shady K's camp and Frank and myself and some others, and it's largely because you can have alternative points of view, and I even wrote this in an email to Shady a while back. You can have alternative points of view. It doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be an all-out war, or it has to be personal. When somebody feels like somebody is taking money away from them or trying to stop their book or stop their movie, then yeah, you kind of take it personal, because books and movies are kind of like your kids. You're very close to them. You don't have a lot of objectivity, and you tend to overprotect them. And I've been guilty of doing that with the assassination movies. So I knew what that was all about. I understood the motive. The problem that I had was that when I filed the confidential, and I need to use those words, Los Angeles Police Department complaint to Internal Affairs about the use of the witnesses in the book Murder Rap, I did not publicize that. I did not go public with the fact that I had gone to Internal Affairs. In fact, that Internal Affairs document was, I want to say, a year old. There was an entire year. I didn't say a word about it. If I wanted to publicize the whole thing, I'd have gone on the fucking internet and on the chat boards and made a big deal about how, gee, I turned Greg Kading over to IA. What a great guy I am. Let's see how that goes. I didn't do anything like that. I did what I thought was the civically responsible thing to do. I turned the information in that I thought I complained about, what I believed to be the problem. Ironically, and we do say this in the assassination book, in the Tupac 187, we do actually talk about the fact that it was, by his own admission, it was the very reason that he lost his major publishers on Murder Rap. And that was, they felt that it was risky and inappropriate, inadvisable to put those witnesses' statements out there. Keith Davis, Tammy Hawkins, the Teresa Swan, whatever you want to alias her name as, to put those interviews out there publicly like that. His own book company didn't agree. His publishers didn't agree with it. And he admitted it. So here I am a year earlier putting this information out about it, and I did this civically responsible thing. I took it through what I would consider to be proper channels. I didn't put it on the internet. I didn't put it on any fucking chat board. I didn't do anything like that. I came straight out of the gate with it, and I told the police exactly what I thought. Now, at that point, if they wanted to do nothing about it, I didn't care. I said what I had to say about it, and I left it at that. Again, I didn't publicize the damn thing, okay? The second misconception that this guy likes to throw out in his little martyrdom is the fact that he says that I was out there trying to stop his book from getting published. The reality is I didn't put that complaint about the IA thing. I didn't even read the book until it had been out for a couple of weeks. I didn't want to read the book. I didn't care. It had a point of view that was different than the one I had, and I really wasn't interested because I didn't really think it was all that great to begin with. I thought the whole point of view was stupid. So I didn't even read the book for like a week and a half after it came out. And when I did, I saw what was going on, and I made the complaint. So this whole bullshit about I was out trying to steal the book and I was out trying to stop his book from being sold, nothing could be further from the truth, unless he thinks that the LAPD would have tried to stop him from selling his book. And I don't understand how that works. So, again, this whole thing about misunderstanding, and that's really where this whole, I don't want to call it a war, but that's kind of where this whole personal thing started, was that, you have two different points of view. Don't take it personally, but if I have a problem with something you do, I'm going to say something about it, and I'm going to address it through what I consider to be appropriate channels. I didn't publicize it, and it irks me to this day that he and a couple of other people decided to take that fight public and really get out there and start defacing me and start calling me names and all that. Because at the end of the day, what I did was all behind the scenes. I wasn't wanting to put it out there. It wasn't my interest to embarrass the guy. It wasn't my interest to make a point. I just didn't agree with what he did.
Do you feel that the aftermath of you going to the LAPD, presenting the information that you had and the leak of subsequent information, do you feel that that hurts the case?
Well, anytime you have evidence of a confidential nature that hasn't been exposed publicly, I think that the police need an opportunity to investigate it. I think they need an opportunity to review the facts in it. I think that they need to have the first shot, and that was ultimately what drove our decision. I didn't want the cops coming back to say, you know what, we probably could have arrested somebody, but you guys went out there and named names, and now these people have gotten lawyers, and these people have, they're cleaning their house right now, or they're hiding their pictures, or they're burning their documents. It's the Watergate. They're in there doing the big cover up. Anytime you give anybody a chance to circle the wagons, you've basically spoiled evidence. And that's what it became. It became spoiled evidence. Once that letter, there was no harm in us putting the letter out in full context in the book, because it had already gone out there. They had already allegedly reached Little Half Dead and asked him about it, and they had reached out to the Pattons and asked the Pattons about it. And they even tried to reach out to Chris Blatchford and ask Chris Blatchford about it. So they were going out there, but they were doing everything they could to spoil the evidence. Now, if you don't believe it, fine, leave it alone. If you don't believe it, say you don't believe it. If you don't believe it, why, knowing that you're ruining evidence, because you could be wrong. How arrogant is it for you to think that you know better than everybody else, and this couldn't possibly be right, and to make sure of that, you're going to spoil it so no one has an opportunity to even follow up on it. Those are the things that really bother me. At one point, we had the now sheriff of the county of Los Angeles. He was the former chief of police of Long Beach. We had Jim, actually, as one of Michael's contacts, a friend of Michael's. We had Jim McDonald, actually, we wanted to go and have him talk to Little Half Dead and see if maybe somebody might be able to get some information that way. But of course, we couldn't do that after they, broke the letter out, because by that time, now the people that were, persons of interest, they would never have an opportunity to, or the police I'm talking about would never have an opportunity to ask them questions that these people after 20 years may not be prepared to answer. And so, yeah, I think it did hurt the case.
Do you feel by the release of the book Tupac 187 that more people will come out and speak by the information that you're putting out?
Well, before I answer that, let me say this. Tupac 187 is probably 90% of everything I want to say about the entire 7-8 years that I've had to review this and every day live the whole Tupac story. It's everything I had to say, and I'm content in its publication that it accurately reflects what my beliefs are, what my concerns are, what my hopes are for the investigation, that it does that. So I am satisfied with what it's done. Now, in terms of asking whether or not somebody else might be inspired to come forward, I do believe that when people hear about things in a public medium, take the case of Bill Cosby, and I mean, that's such an overwhelming example of that. One person had the courage to come forward and talk about something that at first was completely unspeakable. Oh, you're full of crap. That Bill Cosby could never do that to anybody. Look at this guy. He's rich. He's an entertainer. He's well respected. He's a doctorate and sits on the board of several major universities and has written books, and he's a published author. He could never do anything like assault a woman or date rape a woman or drug a woman. He could never do anything like that. Well, no sooner than the first person came out, then another person came out. And no sooner did that person come out than another person come out. Where are we at now, Jesse? What, 20 women that have come out? So yeah, I believe that if there's any steam or any motion at all, any traction to any of the things that are being said in Tupac 187, I think there's more than one person out there that would respond to that and would step forward. In fact, that did happen during the writing of the book. We actually contacted the woman that was actually willing to give us her statement regarding the fact that she was at the Peterson Museum and she saw Rafael Perez. She talked to Rafael Perez. She placed Rafael Perez at the Peterson Museum both the night and day before and the day of the Christopher Wallace shootings. She placed him at the scene of the crime. This woman very wisely was told by her father, it's probably not a good idea to put your name out there. But the point being is that I didn't even know who she was, and it wasn't until we started actually contacting media and public relations and actually started passing around certain chapters from the book that it actually got this woman's attention. And she called me and said that she was particularly interested in our book, and here's why. So there's a perfect example, and she gave us permission to use her story, and boom, because we were out there beating down the ground and beating the bushes, you know, sure enough, stuff comes out. So yeah, I actually do think that that is not an unrealistic statement at all.
Do you feel that the recent triples that Suge Knight have tied in with the release of that letter?
That's a leading question. Yeah, I absolutely do. I do. You have to look at it this way. I'm not Suge Knight, so I can't be in Suge Knight's head. God knows I don't think I'd want to be at this point. But here's the deal. Again, take Robert Soria out of the picture. Take him out of it for a minute, and let's take a look at anybody else that might be involved with the story. Reggie Wright or Sharitha or anybody else. David Kenner, all these people. Now, suddenly a letter comes out from nowhere. Comes completely out from the blind. And it's saying, well, there's this theory in this letter that you, Suge Knight, were a victim, that you were set up, that there may have been an attempt to take over your record label, and that you were duped, and that the people that you trusted were maybe a bit behind it. And that's what the letter comes out. I mean, Suge Knight's not going to care who wrote the letter. Most people that get the dime dropped on them don't care about the source of the information. They don't care about who brought the information. You don't blame, you don't kill the messenger. What they do is they look at the information and they look at where the information comes from. Not who brought it to them, but where it comes from. And in this case, the information was a letter that was given to us by Chris Blatchford. Chris Blatchford's name got in there. Now, Suge Knight, Suge's parents, Heron, Neckbone, those guys, they all knew Chris Blatchford because he was the reporter on the beat that covered all that stuff at the time. So Chris Blatchford has a name and a reputation that's out there. And he was around Compton as Compton was coming up. And he knew Suge Knight's mom. He knew, what's his name? Buntry. He knew Buntry's parents. So when Chris Blatchford, who has a reputation of not being a bullshit artist and being a pretty stand-up guy, when you hear that a letter with these kinds of allegations come out, and they come out from Chris Blatchford, and you know Chris Blatchford to be a pretty straight-up dude, to the point where Suge went to the interview in 2008 with Kevin Hackey and Frank Alexander because Chris Blatchford was there. I mean, I didn't pull all this history out of my ass. These people all know each other. Chris Blatchford knows Suge Knight. This isn't just some random theory. Suge Knight, in my opinion, just following kind of common logic, if you hear about a letter or you hear about a theory or you hear about this word on the street that maybe there's something more going on that might have been mentioned in this letter, you're going to check it out. You're going to go find out who was behind it, who was doing what, and who was responsible. You're going to get down to the bottom of it. And as he showed clearly in this whole situation with these guys on the set of the movie and the hitting the guy with the truck, Suge Knight's the kind of guy that he deals with his problems head on. Smart? No. But he deals with them head on. So when you get a guy like Suge Knight out there and something comes up to him, he's going to start asking some questions, and he's probably not going to be very polite about the way he's asking them. So I'm sure word got around on the street very fast that Suge Knight was asking questions about, well, is this true? Doesn't matter who it came from. He wasn't asking who the hell is Robert Soria. Didn't care. He wanted to know if the allegations were true. Was he set up? Was it done by people that were close to him? Was it done by people he trusted with millions of dollars? Were these people really responsible for doing it? Was it not a hit on Tupac? Was it really a hit on Suge? All of these questions he wanted to know, so he started asking around. 6 days later, after he started asking around, 2 guys show up at a nightclub, shoot the guy full of holes, and say, "You killed Tupac." Well, we all know what that's about. It wasn't really about the fact that he killed Tupac, because I don't think anybody believes that Suge killed Tupac. We kind of pointed that direction in the assassination movies, but at the end of the day, that's what these people wanted everybody to believe right before Suge got shot. So, you do the math. He's asking questions about it. They're tired of the questions being asked. And if you read the book, you'll go back and find out that our theory has been that they wanted Suge Knight dead or in prison all along. So this is just an extension of that.
A J Mix exclusive.
What up, shut up?